هاي العجلة الثانية، وهذا البشر محترق لا حول الله يا ربي. هاي جثة، استغفر الله ربي.
هذا العراق، والعراق هو أساسا فيه من المشكلات ما يعني يجعل العراق غير مستقر.
It's so funny that people who hate Trump are apologizing to the Iranian people for killing their general. People, that's not their general. People don't like him. He's been killing people for the past decade. He's a terrorist. You don't apologize for killing a terrorist. And the news is not telling you that because they just want to hate Trump. They don't want to believe that he's doing something right and he's going to bring peace back to Iran.
فهذه الضربات وهذه التصعيدات هي جعلت العراق الآن على يعني
I proclaim the name of the Lord Jesus Christ over the capital of Texas. I stand against Islam and the false prophet Muhammad. Islam will never dominate the United States, and by the grace of God, it will not dominate Texas.
تو در اونجا مستقر هستند با رمادی چند کیلومتره.
We've killed a figure who's incredibly important and popular in Iran, and incredibly important and influential throughout the region. This is someone who is not only well known in Iran, but Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, throughout the region. It's an incredibly consequential figure who has been, I think, openly assassinated. It is an incredibly reckless step that the Trump administration has taken.
It's so funny that people who hate Trump are apologizing to the Iranian people for killing their general. People, that's not their general. People don't like him. He's been killing people for the past decade. He's a terrorist. You don't apologize for killing a terrorist. And the news is not telling you that because they just want to hate Trump. They don't want to believe that he's doing something right and he's going to bring peace back to Iran.
Impeachment vote in House delayed as Clinton launches Iraq airstrike, citing military need to move swiftly. Now, Margaret, actually, not to diminish the importance of the airstrikes in Iraq at the time.
General Qasem Soleimani is an Iranian national hero. The Iranians consider him as martyrs. He was the person who engineered the defeat of ISIS in Iraq alongside the Iraqi armed forces, including the popular mobilization units.
But that's nothing compared to the murder or the assassination of General Soleimani. And this comes during the Senate impeachment trial. So what do you see as the implication here?
It's so funny that people who hate Trump are apologizing to the Iranian people for killing their general. People, that's not their general. People don't like him. He's been killing people for the past decade. He's a terrorist. You don't apologize for killing a terrorist. And the news is not telling you that because they just want to hate Trump. They don't want to believe that he's doing something right and he's going to bring peace back to Iran.
I proclaim the name of the Lord Jesus Christ over the capital of Texas. I stand against Islam and the false prophet Muhammad. Islam will never dominate the United States, and by the grace of God, it will not dominate Texas.
You're spilling.
This has been going on now for weeks and weeks and weeks.
1 week ago, a rocket attack in northern Iraq killed a U.S. military contractor. The Americans blame the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah brigades. 2 days later, the U.S. launched multiple airstrikes at targets in Iraq and Syria, killing at least 25 fighters. The next day, Hezbollah brigades denied responsibility and vowed to retaliate. Then on New Year's Eve, hundreds of Iraqis stormed the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad. Among them, two powerful Iranian-backed militant leaders. Thousands of U.S. troops were placed on standby. And then last night, that massive escalation. A U.S. drone strike outside the Baghdad International Airport, killing General Qasem Soleimani as the puppet master of Iran's proxy forces throughout the Middle East. Soleimani was seen as second in power only to the Ayatollah himself. So all of this has raised anxiety and questions about what might happen next, and we're going to tackle that right now. Joining us, Janice Stein of the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, Kaveh Shahruz, a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and from Waterloo, where she teaches at the University of Waterloo, Besma Momani. Janice, let's start with what I think is a key question for a lot of people tonight, which is any of this moving us closer towards war?
I certainly don't think we're going to see an all-out war between Iran and the United States, which is what is raising anxiety. There is a likelihood that there will be some further escalation. I think everyone here is aware, particularly in Iran, of how dangerous a rapid jump up the ladder is. And so, I do not think we will see an all-out war between these two countries.
Kaveh?
I actually entirely agree with that. I think, there's a lot of heated rhetoric nowadays, and Iran's leaders have to bluff and bluster a little bit, and they have to retaliate in some way, and we can certainly discuss what that retaliation would look like. But I think the Iranians recognize that, in any sort of direct combat with the Americans, they would not be able to hold on to power very long, and I think they're primarily interested in preserving their power. And I get the impression that even the Americans, the Trump administration is not interested in war. It's not very domestically popular in an election year, particularly.
So, Besma, let's bring you in on that. If not war, then what might retaliation look like?
Well, I think we're going to see the Iranians possibly using its proxy forces throughout the region. It will want to, I think, attack probably Western interests, particularly commercial ones. Cyber warfare is not off the table. That is something that the Iranians have been perfecting over the years. So I think there's a lot of possibilities out there. And make no mistake, I think the Iranian hardliners do want to avenge the death of Soleimani. One really can't underestimate how valuable he was to the Iranian enterprise. So I think it's going to be a rough road ahead for many people in the region in particular, who are frankly going to be caught in the crossfires of both the Americans and the Iranians going after each other after this.
Kaveh?
I think that's right. I think the Iranians have every incentive to retaliate in some way to save face. You will see their proxies do certain things. You will see cyber warfare, likely terrorist attacks, perhaps. But at the end of the day, I think they will have to contain it in some way because, as I mentioned earlier, they can't engage in direct warfare. It's asymmetric warfare that they might be able to succeed in.
So, Janice, I think some people might have been relieved when they heard you say that there wasn't. unlikely to be actual war. But then now, we hear about this potentially rough road ahead. I mean, do you feel there'll be retaliation?
Yes, there will be some things, certainly, although I think there's a risk that we over-exaggerate Soleimani's importance. He's a divisive figure inside. His real ties are to the militias that he built outside Iran. But I think the kind of retaliation we're going to see, it's going to be very calibrated. We've already had, Ian, an attack on a tanker. We've had attack on bases. We'll see some of that, but that's a far cry from saying this is a war that is going to engulf the whole area. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, speaking of the area, I'm going to ask each of you this. A country that you think we should be looking at in terms of a potential target of retaliation, or Besma, where things might happen next. What spot would you focus on?
Well, I'm most concerned about Iraq and Lebanon because they've really been the site of where the Iranian regime has most meddled in the region and has been most able to use proxy forces for its purposes. And I think what the Iraqis are very afraid of is indeed this is going to embolden their hardliners. This is going to potentially make a parliament in favor of asking the U.S. forces to leave. One thing that I've been watching for several months now is both Iraq and Lebanon have had these protesters and demonstrators calling for the end of Iranian meddling. And unfortunately, I think what you're going to see is, in fact, the Iranians make it more, frankly, impossible for those protesters to be heard. They've already captured the narrative in the past 24 hours, obviously, and I think they're just going to make very fragile democratic politics in those countries.
It's so funny that people who hate Trump are apologizing to the Iranian people for killing their general. People, that's not their general. People don't like him. He's been killing people for the past decade. He's a terrorist. You don't apologize for killing a terrorist. And the news is not telling you that because they just want to hate Trump. They don't want to believe that he's doing something right and he's going to bring peace back to Iran.
Where Soleimani was very, very active and the Iranian regime is very active. And Russia has a lot of influence over what the Iranian regime does. So if they want to escalate things, I think they have that kind of influence to call for Iran to escalate. If they want to de-escalate, they can turn down the heat a little bit.
Besma, with Soleimani gone here, I'm not sure how the succession of power works within his organization. Can he be easily replaced, or does this make a big difference to his organization?
Well, he's already been replaced. The replacement's been announced. I think the important thing...
This phone footage captures the immediate aftermath. The American missiles were launched from a drone circling above Baghdad airport, destroying the vehicles and killing Iran's most feared military leader. The strike itself was captured by security cameras at the airport. The explosions ripping the cars apart and turning a proxy fight between the US and Iran into a direct confrontation. From his Florida resort, from where the presidential assassination order was issued, Donald Trump tonight stepped forward to justify his action.
Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel, but we caught him in the act and terminated him. Soleimani made the death of innocent people, his sick passion, contributing to terrorist plots as far away as New Delhi and London. Today we remember and honor the victims of Soleimani's many atrocities, and we take comfort in knowing that his reign of terror is over. We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war.
Following the missile attack, reaction on the streets of Iranian cities quickly followed. Real grief for the loss of a key leader, along with vows from the regime in Tehran that they would pursue forceful revenge. Qasem Soleimani was the leader of the Quds Force, the element of the Revolutionary Guards that projected Iranian power across the region. He was the brilliant and shadowy operative who kept Assad in power in Syria and wielded Shiite proxies in Lebanon, Iraq and Yemen. This evening, Iranian television has broadcast pictures of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei paying a visit to Soleimani's widow and grieving family. For many days, tension has been rising between Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and American forces in the country. Earlier this week, protesters swarmed around the US Embassy in Baghdad, one of the most fortified missions in the world, while US diplomats sheltered inside. The administration had warned that Iran would be held responsible. Across the region, there are fears of an Iranian counterstrike that could spiral out of control. Although one notable US ally in the region was quick to praise President Trump's decision.
Qasem Soleimani is responsible for the death of American citizens and many other innocent people. He was planning more such attacks. President Trump deserves all the credit for acting swiftly, forcefully, decisively.
America has tonight sent thousands more troops to the region. Soldiers from the 82nd Airborne deploying to Kuwait. And at the same time, all US citizens in Iraq have been urged to evacuate immediately. In the last few minutes, Donald Trump has arrived in Miami, having taken the greatest gamble of his presidency, bringing into the open a conflict that until now has been fought almost entirely in the shadows.